Let's find out. If you have any suggestions, leave a comment down below for a chance to be picked in my newer videos. Season 1 Deaths. Benny Hammond. Benny Hammond was introduced as a likable, benevolent diner owner who was a very caring and kind person. He caught Eleven trying to steal his food but didn't hurt her in any way. Instead, he showed a great deal of hospitality towards Eleven, giving her food and taking care of her. This burger dude was a very kind human being who just wanted to help a lost and frightened child. However, his good deeds and care led to his death when he got shot in the head by Connie Frazier and staged as suicide. His last words were, "No, it's funny, your voice, it sounds different." Barbara Holland. Barbara Holland, also known as Barb, was a recurring character in the first season of Stranger Things. She is mainly known for being the best friend of Nancy Wheeler. In late 1983, Barb mysteriously vanishes, which leads Nancy and Jonathan Byers to investigate her sudden disappearance. Eventually, it was revealed that she had been abducted, killed, and sadly served as a meal for the Demogorgon. Her last words were her yelling her best friend's name, Nancy. Nancy, begging for help when she was trapped in the Upside Down. Sadly, as she was in a different dimension, her yelling was just a waste of energy, which caused Barbara Holland to experience death at just the age of 16. Shepard. Shepard was a minor character in the first season of Stranger Things. He was a government scientist at Hawkins National Laboratory under the employment of Dr. Brenner. Wearing a hazmat suit linked to a chain rope, he entered the Upside Down through a gate in the lab, evidently being tasked with exploring the Upside Down. Shepard reported through his radio to the lab about his location. Several moments later, a startled Shepard notified the scientists in the lab that there was something else present in the Upside Down. Shepard frantically called to be reeled in as the monster could be heard over the intercom. Although his request was obeyed, the cord was yanked violently in numerous directions and halted. His last words were, "Pull me out, pull me out, pull me out." After the encounter seemed to be finished, the wire was successfully pulled back. Yet only a bloodied piece of his suit was all that remained of Shepard. Season 2 Deaths. Bob Newby. Robert Bob Newby was a main character in Stranger Things, being introduced in the second season. The boyfriend of Joyce Byers, he worked as the manager at the town's local radio shack. In October of 1984, Bob and Joyce were infatuated with one another, with Bob seeing a future with her and her sons by proposing moving out of Hawkins to start somewhere new. However, his plan was delayed when Joyce's son, Will, began having memory issues and seizures related to a tunnel slowly growing in Hawkins. While tending to Will at the Hawkins National Laboratory, strange dog-like creatures from the tunnel began attacking the lab, trapping the Byers and others inside. Using his computer skills to turn off the security system, Bob helped Joyce and the others escape, but was unfortunately mauled to death in front of her by a juvenile Demogorgon. His last words were, "Yeah, okay." Season 3 Deaths. Bruce Lowe. Bruce Lowe was a recurring antagonist in the third season of Stranger Things. His main personality trait was his disrespect and sexist attitude toward women. He would often make inappropriate and crude jokes at their expense with his coworkers. Nancy Wheeler was a frequent target of his mockery. He was a journalist for the Hawkins Post who treated female employees working at the Post with disdain. Bruce eventually became one of the Flayed, along with his boss Tom Holloway, after being possessed by the Mind Flayer. Both Bruce and Tom confronted Nancy and Jonathan Byers at the Hawkins Memorial Hospital in an attempt to kill them, only for Bruce to be killed by Nancy. His last words were, "Marco." Tom Holloway. Thomas Holloway was a recurring antagonist in the third season of Stranger Things. He was a journalist and the editor-in-chief of the Hawkins Post. He always looked for a good story to be published for the newspaper. However, he was sexist as he treated the women working at the Hawkins Post, especially Nancy Wheeler, with disdain. Ironically, despite his sexism, he cared deeply for his wife and daughter. After his daughter, Heather, became possessed by the Mind Flayer, she allowed Tom and his wife to be possessed as well. After becoming flayed, Tom fired Nancy and Jonathan to keep them from investigating a story related to the actions of the Mind Flayer. Later, Tom, along with his coworker Bruce Lowe, who also became possessed, tried to kill Nancy and Jonathan at the Hawkins Memorial Hospital as the two came to see the flayed Doris Driscoll, only for Tom to be killed by Jonathan. His last words were, "Where are you going?" Heather Holloway. Heather Holloway was a recurring character, and later an antagonist in the third season of Stranger Things. She was mainly known for being a sweet and sensitive neutral girl who hangs out with and works alongside Billy as a lifeguard at the Hawkins Community Pool. During the summer of 1985, Heather became a member of the Flayed after being kidnapped by a possessed Billy. She helped Billy flay more people, including her parents. On July 4th, Heather and her mom were summoned by the Mind Flayer to Brimborn Steel Works, where she was melted by the Mind Flayer and merging with it to make it stronger, along with her mom, Mrs. Driscoll, and the rest of the Flayed, thus killing her. Her last words were, "Yes, but not us, not us." Dr. Alexei. Alexei was a recurring character in the third season of Stranger Things. He had a very childlike personality. During his brief partnership with Hopper, Joyce and Murray, he was shown to enjoy Slurpees and cartoons, and longed to join in the festivities at the Hawkins 4th of July Fun Fair. Alexei was also overjoyed to win a giant stuffed Woody Woodpecker at the fair moments before his death. He was one of several Russian scientists developing an experimental technology which could open gates to an alternate dimension, previously encountered by Hawkins' lab in the United States. Alexei later won one of the carnival games, and he got a giant, stuffed Woody Woodpecker. His last words were, "Murray, look, it isn't rigged. It isn't rigged," before getting killed by Grigory, a Russian hitman. Grigory was a recurring antagonist in the third season of Stranger Things. Grigory was a Russian soldier and hitman, answering to General Stepanov. Grigory was present in the United States during the USSR's secret operation in Hawkins, Indiana, in which a secret scientific facility was constructed under Starcourt Mall. Grigory was one of various operatives tasked with keeping the operation secret, using force if necessary. Grigory and Hopper had various violent encounters at multiple locations around Indiana, including the abandoned Hawkins lab and the local fun fair. This culminated in a fistfight in the underground facility, in which Hopper finally overpowered and killed Grigory. His last words were, "The Americans, I've found them." Billy Hargrove. Billy Hargrove was a main character and later an antagonist. Introduced in Season 2, he was the older stepbrother of Max Mayfield, who he often mistreated, among others. Eventually, he became under the possession of the Mind Flayer, who used him as a vessel and as a tool to gather the civilians of Hawkins, to create a larger physical vessel to host the Mind Flayer and the Spider Monster. Unlike the other Flayed, he was never integrated into the monster's body and was granted a degree of superhuman ability while acting under the Mind Flayer's command, but his actions were still mostly under the direct control of the Flayer. During the moment in which Billy dragged Eleven toward the Mind Flayer and was about to give her up to it, she was able to reach his humanity by reminding Billy of the boy he was. The boy that existed before his mother's departure, which left him to be raised by his abusive father, eventually turning him into the bully he became. Deciding to make a change, Billy physically held back the Flayer, who killed him by stabbing him in the chest. In his final words, he apologized to Max, "I'm sorry." Season 4 deaths. Chrissy Cunningham. Chrissy Cunningham was a recurring character in Stranger Things, being introduced in the 4th season. She was the head cheerleader and most popular girl at Hawkins High School. Eddie found Chrissy standing in the same room where he had left her, but now she was in a catatonic state. Eddie approached her, trying to awaken her, but Chrissy was unresponsive. Eddie was still calling her name and trying to wake her from her catatonic state. He shook her and told her to wake up. He told her that he was starting to feel afraid and that he did not want her to play jokes on him. Chrissy began to levitate and was slammed to the ceiling, back first. Her limbs began to violently twist and snap, as well as her jaw, before her eyes then burst. Her last words were, "Help, help. Somebody, help me, help." No. Fred Benson. Fred Benson was a recurring character in the 4th season of Stranger Things. He was a student at Hawkins High School and worked on the school newspaper. While Nancy was speaking to Wayne Munson about Chrissy's murder, Fred heard the ticking of a clock behind him, in the woods. Following the sound, he investigated the woods and found a coffin with a grandfather clock lying on top of it. He was suddenly surrounded by undead-looking mourners, accusing him of being a murderer. Terrified, Fred ran away. By nightfall, Fred reached the road where the car accident had occurred the previous year, and suffered from another hallucination. He hallucinated that he was back at the accident, and that the dead man was crawling out of the burning wreckage. Alarmed, Fred stumbled backwards and fell into an open grave. Vecna then appeared, taunting him, and killed him through the same method he killed Chrissy. The following morning, Fred's corpse was found lying on the highway. His last words were, "What do you want? No, 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 no." Martin Brenner. Dr. Martin Brenner, or the villain Papa, is a major character in Stranger Things, appearing in the 1st and 4th seasons. Brenner starts out as one of the show's main antagonists, but returns in a more morally ambiguous role in the 4th season. Brenner, who allegedly worked for the U.S. Department of Energy, was a government figure steeped in mystery and controversy. He was a senior research scientist and director of Hawkins National Laboratory. He had a major role in various controversial experiments. Brenner raised a number of test subjects at Hawkins' lab, including 11, who possessed psychokinetic abilities. By 1986, Brenner and Dr. Sam Owens had established the Nina Project. situated at a top-secret facility in the Nevada desert. The project was conceived in response to Eleven losing access to her psychokinetic abilities, and was designed to reactivate her powers via an experimental procedure. Brenner and Owens wished to use Eleven's abilities to stave off the continued existential threat posed by the Upside Down. After some initial hesitation, Eleven participated and ultimately regained her abilities. Brenner sought to continue the experiments, wanting to push Eleven's abilities beyond their previous limit. Brenner and Owens began to argue when Eleven insisted on returning to Hawkins, which provoked Brenner to forcefully incapacitate both Eleven and Owens. Shortly after this, the U.S. military arrived and commenced a full-scale attack on the facility. Lieutenant Colonel Sullivan believed Eleven to be the root of the issues plaguing Hawkins, and sought to eliminate her. Brenner was fatally wounded in the attack, but Eleven managed to escape unscathed, destroying a military helicopter in the process. Brenner and Eleven exchanged some final words. His last words were, "Everything I did it for you. I need you to understand. Please tell me you understand. Please." Eddie Munson. Edward Eddie Munson was a main character in Stranger Things, being introduced in the 4th season. He was the leader of the Hellfire Club at Hawkins High, an electric guitar player in his band Corroded Coffin, and the friend and role model of Dustin Henderson. After Vecna explained to Nancy Wheeler exactly what he planned on doing to Hawkins if he killed a 4th victim, she awakened and warned her group, including Eddie, that Vecna planned to destroy their town. Safely united again, the group conferred and hatched a plan to defeat Vecna and save Hawkins from the fate Nancy had described. The group dropped off Max, Lucas, and Erica at the Creel house. From there, the remaining teens drove to the Munson trailer where they entered the Upside Down. Once inside, they split up. Steve, Nancy, and Robin walked to the Creel house through the woods, while Dustin and Eddie remained at his trailer to lure the demo bats away from the house. Eddie succeeded in drawing the attention of the bats through playing a solo of Master of Puppets by Metallica on his electric guitar. However, as the demo bats came in swarms, Eddie and Dustin dashed into his trailer as the bats tried to break in. For a minute, they thought they were safe, but when the bats found their way in, the boys realized they had to leave the Upside Down through the gate if they wanted to make it out alive. Dustin successfully escaped through the gate, but Eddie refused to follow. Instead, he ran out of the trailer and lured the demo bats away on his bicycle. When they knocked him off the bike, Eddie pondered the option of running. Rather than running, he drew his makeshift shield and spear, and faced the horde of demo bats, which swarmed around him. He managed to kill several before they overpowered him and pinned him to the ground, gnawing at his skin. Eddie remarked that with his death, he was finally graduating, and with his final breaths, he told Dustin that he loved him. "I love you, man," before dying in Dustin's arms. Jason Carver. Jason Carver was a recurring antagonist in the 4th season of Stranger Things. Jason was a rich athlete dating the most popular girl in school. His last words were, "You have 5 seconds to wake her up." 4, 3. It ended when Lucas attacked him, having no other option, and the boys fought each other. When Max's heart stopped and completed Vecna's plot, a massive surge of energy manifested, and a crack between the real world and the Upside Down formed, snaking across the attic floor and leaking vines. Coming to, Jason found himself trapped when the vines grabbed him and the energy disintegrated his midsection. Season 5 deaths. While Season 5 didn't come out yet, certain characters have high death probabilities than others, including Will Byers, Vecna, Eleven, and Murray. If Will is ought to die in Season 5, his last words would probably include a love confession for Mike before he passes out. He might say, "I always loved you, Mike." Vecna is very most likely to die in the last season.